Namaskar and welcome to Media Scan. We are back with the headlines, controversies and perspectives of the week. Tension is rife after dire threats and attacks on the Hindu community in several cities of the UK. Government has raised the issue at the highest level, but what's behind this growing Hinduphobia in the West? We will decipher that in a few moments. But first up, what made news? Prime Minister Narendra Modi has cautioned mayors and deputy mayors that linking development works with elections can hamper the optimum growth of cities. He underlined that for holistic development, we must de-link development from an election-centric approach. PM Modi was addressing the Conference of Mayors and Deputy Mayors earlier this week. A massive crackdown across more than a dozen states was the biggest headline midweek as the NIA and ED picked up more than 100 persons from the Popular Front of India for terror funding, arms training and radicalization. Those arrested include the top office bearers of the PFI and its affiliates. Some members and supporters of the PFI later held protests in a few cities. PFI and its affiliates like the Campus Front of India have been on the radar of the investigating agencies for a long time. News of violence in Leicester, then Birmingham, followed by vicious threats plastered across social media, led to serious concerns about the safety of the Hindu community in the UK. Government of India has taken up the matter at the highest level, but questions remain about the role of the local police. The incidents have brought back focus on growing Hinduphobia in the Western world. To understand the issue in more detail, stay on for a few moments. Will Rahul Gandhi heed the requests of party leaders? Will it be a contest between Ashok Gehlot and Shashi Tharoor? These and other speculations continue to keep the media abuzz. More names like Manish Tiwari, Mallikarjun Kharge, Kamal Nath and Digvijay Singh are also doing the rounds as the scheduled date for the filing of nomination for the new Congress president is here. UP government's move to conduct a survey of madrasas and properties owned by Waqf led to a lot of debate on media platforms. While the madrasa survey has been welcomed by prominent Muslim bodies, the AIMIM and few others have questioned the move. From Leicester to Birmingham to so many towns and cities of the United Kingdom, there are attacks on religious places, cultural markers are being humiliated, damaged, children and women are being targeted just because they belong to a particular community and they are being culturally assertive. They want to wear their identity on their sleeves. We on Media Scan have been raising repeatedly the growing challenge of Hinduphobia in the Western world. And now, the events of the United Kingdom prove that Hinduphobia is not only real, but ignoring the challenge is fraught with dangers. And yet, there is the media, there are intellectuals, there are academics and commentators who keep asserting that Hinduphobia is imaginary, even though the events are staring at us every day. So what is this entire challenge of Hinduphobia and how does the Indian community deal with it? To decipher this challenge and how the Indian community is supposed to face up to it, I have here with me two very special guests connecting from across continents. My first guest for the evening, Avtans Kumar. You have been seeing him, listening to him on Media Scan on earlier occasions. He is connecting to me straight from the US. Namaskar and welcome back, Avtans Kumar.
Namaste. Thank you for having me on your show, Smita.
And my second guest, connecting straight from ground zero, if I may say so, Manu Khajuria. Manu is the General Secretary of the Friends of Indian Society of the UK. She is also an aware and active, a concerned citizen of the community who is worried like all of us with what's going on. So Manu Khajuria, thank you for finding the time at such short notice for Media Scan. Welcome here and do tell us what's going on.
Namaste and thank you, Smitaji, for discussing this very important topic. As you very clearly and rightly said in the beginning, that I'm right here on ground zero. So what we have been seeing is, and it cannot be called in any other words, it is an extremist attack on the Hindus living in the UK. So what was a cricket match altercation between just your average sports fan was made an excuse to extend the violence and vandalism further in the UK. And from the night after night, from the 3rd of September to the 7th, we saw Hindu neighborhoods in East Leicester especially being terrorized, hundreds of mobs, radicalized mobs going into these neighborhoods, banging doors, breaking window panes, shattering cars. And in one particular house where there was a Ganpati Pujan happening, this group of radicalized mob youths actually threw in eggs. So this happened from the 3rd of September to the 7th of September, one after the other. And there were appeals made by both Muslim and Hindu religious leaders. But of course, the Hindu youth and the Hindu community listened to their leaders, but the Muslim radicalized mobs definitely did not listen to their leaders, and this continued. There was a lot of use of the social media to make false allegations and peddle fake news. There was an allegation, and a very false and a very dangerous allegation, on a Hindu youth that he had attempted to kidnap a Muslim teenage girl. And this was refuted by the East Leicester police. But then the police took a couple of days to refute these kind of rumors. The breaking of a mosque, again a fake rumor. This particular allegation on this Hindu youth, who was not even in the country at that moment, this took some time for it to be refuted and to be debunked by the East Leicester police. And by the time police would come back, this news or these kind of fake allegations would be viral on social media, and we saw more and more mobs coming into these neighborhoods and threatening people, to the extent that people weren't able, these Hindu families weren't able to go to work also. And this is not a very affluent neighborhood. People need to work daily to to earn their living. So this was happening, and finally on the 17th, we saw the Hindus coming out on a peaceful protest. And yet this was further taken, the Muslim mobs, this enraged them further. They attacked a temple in Leicester. They burned down a Bhagwa Dharj. This carried on to Birmingham, which is a completely different city. We saw how Durga Bhavan Mandir was called a BJP RSS center, and around 200 people, Muslim extremists, gathered in front of this temple, and they were gesticulating obscenely, vulgar things were said, bottles were thrown at this temple. And there is an entire schedule, a UK schedule for attacks on different temples. So I can tell you
Manu
from
Khajuria,
here that
it's very clear from what you are telling us that these are very, very sinister developments. And while some of these incidents have been widely reported in the media here and other places, it also seems to me from your comments that there is a lot that we still do not know about. It's not perhaps been well reported, at least not outside the local publications or the digital media. But I'll come back to you on the question of what the police or the local administration has been doing. How has been their response? Is it up to the mark? Before that, allow me to bring in Avtans Kumar into the discussion. Avtans Kumar, if you remember, we had a very, very detailed discussion on growing Hinduphobia, Hindumesia across campuses, universities, in think tanks, in the seminar circles, etc. in the US. Now, from what we are seeing in the UK, it's not just about an academic discussion or about seminars and campuses. It's now come down to brass tacks. It's a war out there. How do you look at the whole situation? And what do you think is actually happening? Is it limited to UK or is it wider?
To answer your second question first, it is wider, right? We have seen it in UK. We have seen it in the US, in New Jersey. The Tulsi temple, Tulsi Mandir, was attacked, where Mahatma Gandhi's statue was vandalized. It is very important to note that this was done at a mandir, Hindu mandir. Okay, we also saw what's going on in Canada. Finally, I think the government of India has issued a notification about concern, asking people not to go there. So this is a concerted kind of violence that is going on. And like you asked me, it has been boiling, it has been building up for a long time, because the narratives that has been built around Indians and Hindu community in particular, in both in the US and many other parts of the world, especially after the coming of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2014, that has just increased multifold.
Are you saying, Aftans Kumar, that whatever is happening or we are seeing happening is related not only about an impression of the Hindu community, it is actually political because it is related to the political establishment here right now?
It is to a great part, because now they see resurgence of Hindus, that who they have not been, they have been silenced, and they have been going on with the narrative peddled by the secularists and other outsiders. Now they are trying to control the narrative themselves. They're asserting they are more powerful, they have more tools, they have their India's GDP rise and all that. That all combines.
Very quickly, Aftans Kumar, why should a resurgent, a proud and assertive Hindu trouble anybody?
Absolutely not. That's the point. There's a conflict of worldview. When we talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that's one point of view, and there is another point of view where you say my way or highway, right? So that conflict is there.
So I'll come back to you, because you have raised some some larger questions associated with what's going on. But of course, we cannot disconnect or de-link the two. There are larger issues involved which are obviously getting manifested into this kind of violence or threats. Allow me to bring back Manu Khajuria right here. Manu Khajuria, you just saw our friend Aftans Kumar explain to us and try to bring in the larger questions involved in this entire conflict. Do you agree with him? That is one. Secondly, before that, can you tell us what has been the response of the police? Maybe the first time they were taken by surprise, but what about the incidents that are being repeated across cities now? We cannot call it a surprise anymore, can we?
Yes, exactly. I think Aftanji is right, and it cannot be called a surprise anymore. This is a very important point, because what was happening in East Leicester initially, there was this whole messaging coming that, the police were burdened. Everybody was busy with the Queen's funeral. A lot of the police force was involved in that in London, and Leicester is almost an hour and a half away from London City. So that was the excuse initially, that, the forces are overburdened and we weren't prepared for something like this. But it is very, very important to understand that this was their unpreparedness. This was their not realizing that this is an extremist attack on peaceful Hindus, which led to at least 100 properties belonging to Hindus being damaged in East Leicester. Also important to notice that the MP of East Leicester is Claudia Webb. She is very famous for her anti-India and her anti-Hindu stance. After this, there was also no action on the people who actually peddled fake news with an intent to harm and incite further violence against Hindus in the entire country in UK. So you had a Sunny Hundal, a journalist, you had Gus Khan, then you had an Islamo-fascist called Majid Freeman, Muhammad Hijab. These were the people who immediately came out and at every stage have either used words like Hindutva terrorists, or they have said, made some false allegations about a mosque being damaged, and as I mentioned, the kidnapping case. So this was done again and again, and there was no immediate action taken against these fake news peddlers. And now viral on the social media is an entire schedule, which is like this temple is going to be followed by this temple in another city. We're expecting something in London by this weekend. So there is no surprise anymore.
So, of course,
So
there
to
is
your
no
question,
surprise,
Smitaji-
and in fact, it now seems to appear quite organized, isn't it? But on a
Yes.
different question, Ms. Khajuria, our government was conscious, was sensitive to send the President of India, no less, to be present at the funeral of the departed Queen. We have raised at the highest level our concerns about these attacks from the High Commission, from the Indian government sides. In fact, even our External Affairs Minister was cautious enough to raise this at the highest level. And yet, what would you like to say very quickly on the overall response, not just of the local police, but the government as such? Because, you know, the police only get their messages from the government. The top leadership is accountable.
Yes, exactly. I think the response has not been enough. We've heard recently, I think by yesterday itself, there was somebody from Scotland, a Hindu woman from Scotland, who said the Scotland police called her and said that, is there something happening in your area? If it is, you must report to the West Midlands or the East Leicester police, and then they will ask us for support. So we did see some sensitivity in the police now, but it's
Okay.
come too late and more needs to be done. So you're right that we are thankful to the government of India for, you know, making those statements and putting some pressure on UK government, but more clearly, more needs to be done, because there is a threat, and Hindu homes and families are being identified by Hindu markers like a Shubh Labh or a Om on the door or a Bindi on a forehead or Tulsi Ji peeking from the window pane and a Ganpati in a car. So these are the markers that are being used to identify, stalk and target Hindus and Indian families in the UK.
Fine,
so more,
fine.
clearly more
So
needs
it
to be
is
done.
fine. So it is very clearly becoming an everyday kind of thing now, because from one or the other, one-off incidents, it is becoming a kind of othering of a particular community. Very, very serious situation. Avtans Kumar, you have been dealing with the question of Hinduphobia, with the way a community is being targeted, this entire civilizational conflict that we are compelled to face. What do you think our brothers and sisters in the UK and elsewhere in the Western world, whether it is Canada, in the US, what should be their method of response? Are we being reactive? Should there be a long-term thought or a philosophy in place? How do we engage with the government? Your formula to end these challenges and make life peaceful for the Indian community.
Yeah, one of the ways to engage is that, you know, there is a lot of misgivings, and it's our fault where we lived, in, especially I can talk about in the U.S. We had the issue of bulldozer, right? And immediately all the elected representative made the organizers apologize for having that. And there was so many such bad press that came out, and people talked about it. But you know, nobody talked about what Yogi Ji has done to curb crime in his state and what kind of development he has done. So we have to talk about our narrative. We have to talk about our positives, and engage with the local and national level politics. We have been taught from the beginning, padho, 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 and don't get involved in politics. This is the time when we have to get involved in politics at each and every level, from the council, local municipality to higher level, and be engaged with everybody. And one of the ways
Avtans Kumar, I think we'll have to take it up in another episode, because I'm completely running out of time. Thank you for putting it so well. I'll just come back to Manu Khajuria for just a 30-second comment about what she thinks should be one comment about what can be done to make things better right away before we move to the larger issues. Manu Khajuria, quickly please.
Yes, Smitaji, quickly 3 points. First is in agreement with Avtanji that the Indians living here, the Indian diaspora, needs to be politically more active and more aware, and should get engaged in all these political processes. That is sorely missing, despite they being the richest diaspora and the most law-abiding and successful. Secondly, it is very, very important that between India and UK also, India should put the pressure that UK is looking towards India for lots of business deals and trade deals. So I think that pressure should come from India, that their citizenry, their diaspora here should be protected and should be safe. And finally, I think it's important to decouple the Indian identity from the South Asian identity, because this clubbing together is not helping us. We are a powerful nation. We should walk proudly anywhere in the world as Indian citizens, and that should have some weightage and some meaning.
So fine, I think you have put it in very few words but very well. So that sums up, in a way, you have made my work easier, Manu Khajuria, by putting things in perspective so well and telling us what we need to do right now and what more needs to be taken up at a later stage. On that positive and forward-looking note, I think we should bring this conversation to an end with the promise that we shall see better days for the Indian community in the UK as well as the rest of the globe. And thank you for joining us at such short notice, Manu Khajuria. You were very kind to explain things in perspective and very quickly too. Thank you once again.
My pleasure. Namaste.
And Avtans Kumar, grateful to have you once more on Media Scan. You are always there to be with us whenever we have requested you. It is always a pleasure to speak to you on various issues. Thank you once again.
Thank you. And Manu and rest of the people in UK, stay safe and prayerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
The question of Hinduphobia has been raised by the Indian diaspora, by the community from time to time. But most governments, including some of our own, have been trying to ignore the issue at the cost of the safety of our citizens, which has become very, very clear now from what is going on in the UK. As Avtans Kumar said just now, we hope the community is safe, particularly in the light of the coming festival season. But at the same time, this is a good time to pause and think and not just depend on the government to take up issues as and when it happens, but for the community to deliberate how best to live in harmony with others, but at the same time not get terrorized, not get bogged down by people who want to instill fear on the basis of identities and make life miserable for those who are doing their best to rise in the comity of nations. On that thoughtful note, viewers, it's a wrap up on Media Scan for this evening. But we'll come back to you next weekend. Namaskar.